Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Exodus. We're now in chapter 12. As we begin chapter 12, I would like to point out to you where we left off at the end of chapter 11 so that we can bear in mind what is transpiring from chapter 12 onwards. The first point I want to remind us, just to bear in mind, is in chapter 10, in verse 28. It says, Then Pharaoh said to Moses, Get away from me, take it to yourself, and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die. And so Moses said, You have spoken well, I will never see your face again. This is a very important element to bear in mind because this would be the last time that Pharaoh calls Moses to the palace. And later on in chapter 13, we'll see what transpires there. In chapter 11, then, from verse 4 all the way to verse 6, you find that God then pronounces a very important and final plague. It is about all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, they shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill, and the firstborn of the animals. There will be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as was not like it before, nor shall it be like it again. This is going to be a one-time major event. But it will not happen to the children of Israel. Now, this is the background as we enter into chapter 12. In chapter 12, it begins. Remember, this would be an and then. After chapter 11 has completed itself and the Pharaoh servants were forewarned what God will do, then Jehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron. And please bear in mind, it is in the land of Egypt. Now, what is so important about this phrase is this command was given in the land of Egypt, being the first and obviously the last. This is the first time that an instruction was given, because in all the other plagues, it was very much Moses and Aaron speaking to Pharaoh, and the plagues came one after another. Nothing to do with the children of Israel. But in chapter 12, verse 1, comes the final plague, and it involves the children of Israel. However, we are told that this was spoken in the land of Egypt, which obviously tells us that it is not outside of Egypt, meaning there will be, after this, instructions and Torah given that would be in the wilderness for the large part of the Torah. Because once they leave Egypt, there were continual instructions or mitzvot given by God to Moses and to the people. And so this is a very important distinction that this is to happen in the land of Egypt. Now, obviously, the instructions here, much of it were repeated when they were in the wilderness, except for one thing, and we will get there shortly. Now, God spoke to Moses and Aaron, and this is what he said. This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first of month of the year to you. This month, which is the month that they are in right now, it will be the head. This is the word, the head of months. In the Hebrew language, if you have a series of months, the head of month will be the most important month of all the months. So this will be an A. And then we have a B here, that it shall be the first month of the year to you. Now remember the word year, which is Shana, it is a repeat. That's what it means. It is a repeat of the series of months. And so this month that God is speaking to Moses and Aaron shall be the beginning of months. So it is important for us to appreciate that there seems to be a change, or what we will call an instructional remembrance of this particular month, because this particular month is considered the head of months. Now, what does that mean? Did God change the calendar, or did God introduce a new calendar? What we have is this. To the equivalent of what we have today, this would be March, April, May, June, and then we have February and January. And the equivalent would be this. This is considered to be the first of the months. So this will be the second and the third. Then we have July, August, September, October, and so on. Then 4, 5, 6, and 7. What is going to happen is we have coming around, we have what we call a civil calendar. A civil calendar. The first month of the civil calendar really starts here, right? October, November, and then December will be the second month, and then the third month, the fourth month, the fifth month, the sixth month, the seventh, the eighth, 9, 10, 11, and then 12. Now, this is roughly the idea, but one of the things I want to point out to you is this. This is what God is talking about. And at this time in the book of Exodus, you do not find name of months. The Torah itself defines the months by number. So we can see here this idea as the first of months, or the head of months, and it is this month, is all lined up by numbers, and so the number 1 is given to this particular month around March, April time frame. The reason why I'm pointing out to you is this, that the names of months were eventually adopted after they went into exile, into Babylon, and then into the Medo-Persian era. And then you find that these months are more well known in those times, and they are generally what is understood as Persian names to the months of the present day Jewish calendar. But in the Torah, right now in the book of Exodus, all the months are always referred to by numbers. The first month, the seventh month, the 10th month, no, and so on and so forth. And from this chapter onwards, all the months are referred to with the anchor to this particular month. Now, In an equivalent, this would be the month of Nisan, the name that's given in the book of Esther. In chapter 13, this month is described as the month of Aviv. And when we get to chapter 13, I will then explain why this particular reference was made to this month. But for now, I think all of us need to bear in mind that the Israelites never had a name to months. They were always numbering the months. For example, the cycle of the Sabbath, the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day, and the seventh day, which is the Sabbath day. And so the day names are also not known. The months of the year are also not known because they are only counted rather than named. So I will leave that with you so that we are all clear, and then we enter into verse 3. Verse 3 says this way. It says, "Speak to all the congregation of Israel." And what is happening here is in verse 2, the Jews think that people like Moses and Aaron will define what the month is. So the start of the month is actually given by the people of authority of the Levites to decide when the new moon begins. And then in verse 3, it is the responsibility of every man. And that's how verse 1, 2, and 3 is divided up. So the purpose of verse 2 is to designate the beginning of months, a declaration by Moses and Aaron, and the likes of Moses and Aaron in the future generations. But in verse 3, then it will be incumbent on all the congregation of Israel. So let's look at verse 3. What does God say? Still, at this point in time, God is speaking only to Moses and Aaron. The instruction is given to Moses and Aaron to speak, say all this to the congregation of Israel, to mean that all of them needs to observe. Saying this on the 10th of this month, which is this month, the declaration that this is the head of months, or the first month of the year to you, every man, and by every man, please remember that this would be the male gender. It's not telling to the children, to the women, but for the head of household, shall take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. So the idea here of a lamb, this is the word seh. There is no particular equivalent in the English. And so this is as best an equivalent English word to assign. It would be a young animal, which is from the four-legged small animal family. I think that would be an easier way to understand. It's a four-legged animal. It's a small animal that moves in flocks, and it is supposed to be young. That's why the idea of the English word lamb is chosen. And it is to have a lamb for a household. Now, understand that a household is a family. There is a father and there is a mother, and there are children in the household. Not necessarily for one house, but maybe you can say this for a home. This is an entire family in our modern understanding of the word household. And verse 4 says, "And if the household is too small for the lamb," meaning there is an implication that there is a need to eat the lamb, And generally, when a household is small, it's just too difficult for one small family to eat. So it says, let him and his neighbor next to his house uh, to take it according to the number of the persons. According to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. So again, I want to point out, just for clarity, a lamb doesn't mean sheep. A lamb just means a small four-legged animal. And we will then be told what exactly this animal could be. Because four-legged animals, which are small and they gather together in flocks, could be many kinds. But God would then define exactly what he is looking for. So the lamb would be according to his household and his neighbor next door. And so that is an element of sharing that animal. So I will use the animal for now. For some reason, God has made it extremely clear, no ambiguity. Your lamb shall be without blemish. This word, without blemish, means it should be complete, tamim. The reason why it is translated without blemish is an English word. Doesn't quite make the cut, but it's one of the elements. It shall be complete. The idea of complete means that it is whole. It has its two ears, two eyes, four legs. It is not injured. It is not blemished. So the idea of without blemish, actually, it's a fair description, but the visual would be that the lamb must be complete. It must be whole. It is not injured. It is not cropped. It is not blind, which means that in a flock itself, there could be animals that is not complete. And so God wants only the complete ones. The second element here is that it must be a male. The Hebrew is a son, not a daughter. So a male lamb. Then it says here, uh, of the first year. By this, we would understand uh, it would be, how should you say, a year, a male, a year. Now, a year would be 12 months. So basically, what it is trying to indicate that it is a year means it's before the repeat, before the turn of the year. So to be, I guess, more strict to the understanding, it is no more than a year or less than a year, maybe a day less than 12 months. That would be the kind of understanding. And being strict to this means that this is God's instruction. It is not given to the family to decide what kind of animal from the flock. So by looking at this, you would see that God is very exact. It's a mitzvot. These are the instructions. It must be complete. It must be a male. It must be up to a year, no more than a year. That would be the idea. Now, moving forward, you can see this. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now, by this further explanation, the first idea here is from the sheep. This is from the sheep family. And by this, the word here is a young ram. A male sheep is a ram, and so it must be no more than 1 year. So it's a young ram. The second word here is from the goats. And so the English equivalent would be a kid because it's from the goat family, no more than a year old. And so God seems to be very specific in his instruction to Moses, to the congregation of Israel, that this particular ritual is not a free for all, which means this: God's ritual, God's rules. And the people of God, being God's people, they must abide by God's rules. And so this would be, I would say, the beginning of how the people of God, the Israelites, here the congregation of Israel, is to learn to behave regarding the mitzvot or the commands of God. If they can't follow this, then how can they follow the rest of what God says? Now, this idea of choosing the lamb on the 10th of the month, and then you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. This particular mitzvot of selection on the 10th is only done when they were in the land of Egypt. When they are out of Egypt, the instructions that were given in repeated format in the book of Exodus, in the book of Numbers, in the book of Deuteronomy, this 10th of the month instruction was never repeated. And so in the mind of the Jews, when they partake of the Pesach, or this event here, they no longer choose an animal on the 10th. They actually do it and present it on the 14th. So you shall keep it until the 14th day. Now, this idea of the keeping till 14th day is to make sure that the same animal is there. So there is a question: how do you make sure that this is the same animal that you have chosen and that it is still complete, still a male, and still the first year, and is not replaced? And so interestingly, there is very distinct and detailed descriptions here. We are then told the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. Now, this idea, shall kill it at twilight, is it should be shall kill it between I guess you should say between the evenings, or between the darkness, like between the nightfall. And it is often translated as the afternoon. Meaning after the day breaks and before the sunset, in the middle of that period, is really the afternoon. And so the Jews actually then kill the animal after the midday, before the sunset. And that would be the understanding of this passage here. And then they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. So one of the things that is interesting, and let me just move backwards a little bit, which is not really translated in verse 6, is this idea of keep it literally means tie to guard post. Now, this word is missing in the English. Uh, when they choose this lamb, whether sheep or goat, and they have found that it is whole, it is a male, it is under 12 months, they are to tie to the guard post to watch it so that by the 14th day, it is still the same animal, that it hasn't died, right? So it's to make sure that the same animal is there. So the idea of keep it is not quite correct. So it's to tie to the guard post. That's in the Hebrew. And then you put the blood after you kill it. Kill it in the Hebrew sense would be to slaughter it. Uh, and this word slaughter literally means to have a ritual killing. The, the proper Hebrew way of killing an animal is to slaughter it by spilling the blood and removing the blood from the animal. That would be the idea here of slaughter, not just kill, but really to slaughter. And as they collect the blood, they are to put it on the lintel. Now, this idea here, the doorposts would be the sides of the door. So in the houses that they would have a door, and the door would be made this way. And the blood is actually spilled on the sides. So you can think of it, the sides here, and on the lintel. So that would be the lintel. We call it the lintel because that's an English word. This is the overhanging part of the door. And this would be the doorpost. So this is the lintel. This is an old English word. And it means the overhanging part of the door of the houses where they dwell. So the idea here is to put blood and to signify that there is a killing of the animal. Now, if the animal dies, the animal, well, not supposed to die. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen to them. But at this point in time, they're supposed to pick a very healthy animal that won't die in the next few days. That's what it means by without blemish. And after killing, take the blood and spill it on the overhanging part of the door, the two doorposts, where they live, not anybody else's door, which means that they are on the inside where they eat it, not on the outside. But when they kill it, it is likely to show that the blood is to demonstrate in public that it is going to be the slaughter of the animal, either the ram or the goats, and is to demonstrate in public. So this is a public viewing. Now, let me just pause to explain two things. One is some have suggested that this particular time in the March April time frame would be the rise of the zodiac of Aries, the ram. That the Egyptians are largely affected by how the zodiac moves in the sky. I am of the opinion, and which a lot of people have also share this opinion, that in chapter 8, Moses already said that they cannot kill the abomination, because if they kill the abomination, which is the god of the Egyptians, then the Egyptians will kill the Israelites. And the god of the Egyptians, one of them is by the name of Khnum, and he has a ram head and a human body. It is sacrilegious in Israel to kill a ram or a goat. And so in this case, the idea here is, if you could see this verse right here, that God is saying you should pick a young ram or a young goat or a kid, whole and without blemish, a male and of the first year. And so this Phenom is represented by a ram's head. And if you kill a ram in public and demonstrate that there is blood, well, blood means it's already killed. Clearly, the ram isn't alive anymore. This would be very sacrilegious. It will offend all the Egyptians. One of the aspects of why the ram or the kid is chosen is to see whether the congregation of Israel is willing to stand behind Jehovah God, who has shown 9 plagues and in powerful symbols that he is the true and living God, or would they be afraid of their neighbors who are Egyptians, who worship Khnum amongst all the gods that they have? But to kill Khnum is to demonstrate that I'm not afraid to die. Now that seems to be a way of testing the congregation of Israel. That if you obey God, then you will defy the Egyptians. You will offend the Egyptians. And if you have seen the 9 plagues, well, you should know that the true and living God, where Moses and Aaron speaks of, will be there to protect them. And so that in itself is to challenge the Israelites if they were bold enough to defy and offend the Egyptians by killing a symbol of their God. After killing it, in verse 8, it says, "Now you shall eat the flesh that night." The idea here is to teach them that before you eat, it is not going to be raw, obviously. It's going to be roasted in fire with unleavened bread. Now, we need to remember this word. In verse 8, with unleavened bread would be matzah. Matzah. And then with bitter herbs, they shall eat it. Now, the idea of bitter herbs is maror. And these would really be herbs that, well, I guess it's bitter to the taste. It's not the best of food to eat, but it really will make sure that it is not going in smoothly, but you are conscious of eating it because it's bitter. It is unleavened, means it is dry. It is not with yeast. The flesh of the animal is roasted in fire. That would be very succulent. So God tells them, do not eat it raw. Do not boil in water. It has to be roasted. Now, the idea of roasting means you have to put it into the fire. And eventually, one will understand that when you later on in the Torah itself, offering an animal to God is by fire. It is not by boiling. It is not raw. It has to be killed and it has to be burnt. And when you roast an animal, there is a sweet smelling aroma that will rise up, both with the smoke, but particularly with the fat. So these are insinuations or implications that as they eat all animals that is slaughtered, as you can see, and when they are killed right here, they are to roast in fire. It has to be burned. It is not raw, it is not boiled. It is roasted in fire. The head with its legs and its entrails, everything that's inside, including the fat. This idea is the idea of making a sacrifice to God. And eventually, this is mentioned and described as the Passover sacrifice because the animal is involved. A sacrifice is not a sacrifice when there is no animal involved. Verse 10. The night there literally means after sunset. The Hebrew day, the Hebrew day is from sunset to sunset. So the first thing that will happen at sunset, which is night, is the meal. It is an event. And so this first event would be this meal here. And this meal is described to eat everything. Let none remain until morning. And what remains of it until morning, you shall burn with fire. When it says morning here, it would be when the sky turns bright. When the sky grows bright. Not necessarily our English meaning of morning. And this is the way you shall eat it. A belt on your waist, sandals on your feet, staff in your hand. The idea here is that they are dressed to run. So a belt on your waist means you have already worn your inner garments, your outer garments, your tunic, and you have a belt all ready to walk, and your sandals are on your feet, and you're prepared to go for a journey, staff in your hand. Now, recall this entire sequence up to verse 11 is still talking about the man of the house. It is to instruct the man of the house so that the man of the house will know what to do with the people in his house. It says, so you shall eat it in haste. Now, the idea of in haste in this case is in a hurry. This word here, shall eat it in haste, literally means in a hurry. Now, typically, when people eat, you would actually be more relaxed. You sit down, you have a meal, you enjoy. The instructions here given to them is that this is not a time to enjoy. This is a time where there is this ritual of the animal, the killing, the putting the blood onto the doorpost and the lintel, then the burning and the roasting of the animal, preparing to eat it. And when you eat it, you should be ready to run. That is what it means. So this is the first. And it's called, in not so many words, it is the Lord's Passover. And so I want to explain this a little bit before we end today. This word here is Pesach. It is the Pesach to Jehovah. So it is the Lord's Passover. So let me explain this. What does Pesach actually mean? Pesach is it's a Hebrew term, right? Pesach is a Hebrew term, and the Hebrew term comes from the word Pasak. So Pesach, Pasak. Pasak is a verb. This is the action. This action is about someone who hops on one leg, right? Hops on one leg. And this is to hop over. And so when it says this is the Pesach to Jehovah, it literally means this is how Jehovah is going to hop over. Now, I don't like the word skip over, but I guess you could use this word skip in modern day because you have the children's game of hop, skip, and jump, where you actually have yourself on one leg. So one leg is up and one leg is down, and then you hop over. That is to pasak. So the act of hopping over is Pesach. And this is called the Lord's hop over. And the word Passover is more of a gentle way to express it in English. It is the Lord's hop over as he hops over. It's a hopping over event. I think that is what we can actually refer to this event. God is describing this in very broad terms, what they are to do, and into a fair amount of detail that is only for them to be ready to run. So all of these ideas here is very much to eat with them ready to run only when they were in Egypt. When they are out of Egypt, it will be a remembrance. So it will be a different way of handling the Lord's Passover as a feast. This particular event in Exodus chapter 12 is the actual event that God, Jehovah God, is going to perform for them in the land of Egypt. Now, with this, we come to the end of our session today as we end in verse 11. We will carry on next week because I want us to slowly appreciate the word Passover is English. The word should be Pesach. And it comes from the verb pasak. It is to hop with one leg, like hopscotch jump kind of thing. And when you hop over, there is a reason for this, and we will get to the reason next week. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.